just want to say how much I've enjoyed just listening to the various speakers and the conversations yesterday. We do this stuff all the time. We go to these conferences, and I'm always amazed, like, what are you going to really learn? What's new? And I always come away with, yeah, I didn't think of that, and that's a great idea. And I think it just reinforces the need to kind of stay in the loop on these things and continue to participate. I'm going to switch gears a little bit today and talk about something that we didn't talk about yesterday. This is more the human, the softer side of these transformations. I'm going to talk about something as mundane as role changing, title changes as you transform, and some of the pain points that we had and some of the discovery moments that we had at Fannie Mae when we did this. So just a little bit about me. These are the various companies that I've worked for throughout my career. And I think really the only thing of interest up here for most folks would be somewhere around Y2K is when I went from the business side over to the technology side, and I've kind of stayed there since. But was working for ExxonMobil at the time. They had that whole Y2K, the world's going to end scare, all hands on deck. We got to, install a new ERP system. They pulled in a bunch of business people, and at least for ExxonMobil, once you're on the list, you're on the list. So every system project they had after that, you were called to be that business representative. And after about 2 years of it, they just said, look, why don't you just think about an IT career? You've got some background here, and we're always looking to kind of cross-pollinate. So good progressive thinkers over there, and I think that was kind of a sentimental moment for me. And I've just stayed there since. So it's been a nice mix for me. The topics that I'm going to be talking about today, get out of this light, navigating through the changes in the roles, and this has implications in terms of recruiting, training, retaining that talent, and career development for our team members who are obviously in high demand. So you want to be paying attention to these things because talent can be fleeting. Then talk a little bit about some of the evolving roles, some of the mega trends that are impacting our ability to keep this talent and the influences that are impacting the way we operate as technologists today and into the future. And then we'll just have some Q&A at the end. So digital transformation can mean a lot of things. In some cases, it's the same resources with new titles, and that was the case with some of our resources. So I had a business owner before, and that was on Friday. Monday, when they came into work, they were suddenly a product owner. I had a release manager who became a DevOps engineer, a project manager who became a Scrum Master, and a tester who became an SDET. Oop. But if all I did was change titles, arguably I really didn't do much of a transformation. But as I found out, in some cases we actually, in changing titles, we did still execute a transformation. Frankly, what we did, our legacy HR system didn't have these new titles in them, but we went out and we recruited folks with those skill sets and gave them those old titles. And they didn't necessarily like that, but it was the way of onboarding them with the idea that once we catch up on the HR system side, we'll just convert you, which I thought was fairly routine, mundane type of task until we actually did it. And then I found out that suddenly we're called into suspect as in terms of our transformation. Are we actually doing a transformation? Two things actually happened. On the business side, folks were looking into saying, hey, so was the old person not really a project manager or a Scrum Master, but now they are, and how did that happen? And what about all those existing folks that are out there right now who don't have those new titles? Should they be still on the team? And then on the resource side, folks were sitting around watching folks who they considered to be a project manager 3 or a QA 3. Now suddenly they're getting new titles. Now I've got an SDET who's got this prestigious title. Now that person's a Scrum Master. We're all aware that we're doing this transformation to Agile. So what's happening? Now folks who didn't get those new titles are suddenly feeling at risk. Like, uh-oh, maybe I'm not on the team, or maybe I've taken a step back. So further complicating things, just moving folks from old to new titles was this big HR event because there's a whole job description, appropriately so, and a leveling and a compensation that goes with that. So I've got folks who've been a project manager for 15 years who have been Scrum Masters for 15 months. So what are they? And if I move them into that Scrum Master role with 15 months of experience, maybe they're Scrum Master 1 or Scrum Master 2. But they were Project Manager 3, which carried a higher level and a higher compensation. So do I just move them into a new role and have them take it? That doesn't feel particularly good. So there was a lot of detail that I was unaware of. What I thought was just go get this done because we're moving forward with the transformation, suddenly stopped us and said, you know what? These are people. These are our team members. This is our credibility to our business partner. Let's think through this a little bit. So we actually kind of pulled back and said, let's not race through these new titles until we've got this thing fully baked. So what I thought was going to be a fairly straightforward, get it done, move forward, has been one of those aha moments for me that says, let's make sure we have a plan as we onboard these folks. As you start your transformation, think through, how are we going to actually do this? And if somebody's coming in with a legacy title, with years of experience in a legacy skill set, and you're going to propose them as something new, what's your plan? So that's what I want to talk about now. As you do this, here's kind of our lessons learned. So unanticipated or level and comp change issues, what can you do, what should you do? First off, identify the changes where possible and adjust prior to the role change. So if you know you're going to do this in June and it's January, you can start positioning this so that it's not going to be quite as impactful, and it won't be like we did. Friday they had one role and title, and Monday they came in and had something altogether different. You can start transitioning this. And where you are going to do what we did, which was 15 years experience as a project manager, now you've got 15 months experience as a Scrum Master, do I have to take that hit in level and pay? No, and here's why, and this is how we sold it to HR. We're going to put them into developmental roles. We're going to leverage what they've got, but also give them developmental roles in their new assignment that will allow them to leverage their existing PM experiences, which frankly they do anyway, while they're developing additional experiences in Scrum Master. So it's not this all or nothing where, hey, you forfeit everything you ever did in your old role and now you adopt this new one. And that matters to HR because this is what they do and they want to make sure that it's a kind of level playing field for resourcing. So it was actually a really good exercise to go through, and it forced us to go back and think, well, what would we do? Unforeseen skill gaps, always train in advance if you can, and you don't always get that opportunity, especially for in-demand skill sets. We stood up guilds, communities of practice, and centers of excellence. And what we did was really, we relied on them. As if you brought somebody in, they weren't on an island on their own in a business unit, just left to fend for themselves. We created what I think ING talked about yesterday, which was the guilds. And these are just matrix organizations of folks with the like skill set, and they get together on a bi-weekly basis, and they have their own Jabber page, and they just talk through their trade. And they stay connected. And essentially what we do is we establish guardrails and say, here's what this role should be doing, so stay within the guardrails, you're good. If you're outside those guardrails, we should just talk, because we don't want someone going native within their individual projects where suddenly you were brought in to do something kind of transformational, and now you're not. Now you're doing something that's more just compliant with what the team needs you to do, be it sweep the floors or keep the notes or whatever it might be. Let me know if I'm blocking you there. Career mapping. So this was important because people who weren't on those new roles and titles felt they were being exposed, and they wanted to make sure that they knew they were still valued and there was career pathways for them. So what we tried to emphasize is it's not just about moving up and advancement, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the trends, but really this is more about getting a breadth and depth of experiences because that's what you're going to need to compete in the future. And it's not just subject matter expertise that's really deep, but really limited and vertical. We still probably need some of those folks, especially with some of our legacy applications, but going forward, that's really not the skill set that's going to reward you and give you the career that you're looking for. Recruitment and retainment. I'm Fannie Mae, and Fannie Mae is not considered one of those Silicon Valley innovator, progressive firms, but we are. And there's pockets of that within the organization that abound. I happen to be in one of them, and my advice would be start with your own department. Change the image of your own department, and as you're out recruiting, leverage the image of your department where that person's going to work. You can't change the whole company overnight. I don't know that you can do that. And the whole company may not be on board with the transformation the way you and your group are on board with that. So market the image of your organization and let that permeate. Where practical, try to adopt the tools and processes of the folks that are coming in. So they've been trained on tools. These are probably the right tools. These are tools that you're probably looking at as well. Don't be resistant to that. Be open to that. How could that work? Because that's going to be an enticing factor for someone coming in and say, hey, the latest tools, the tools that you're using today are the tools that we're using as well. Not across the entire organization, but in my cool organization, that's what we're doing. So that's what you'll be joining. That can be very appealing to someone. Ensure the culture is friendly and open to diverse thought, diverse culture, diversity. If you've got that open culture, people are going to be far more willing to join that, especially if you're viewed as this stodgy old bureaucratic GSE like Fannie Mae, where you just think, oh my gosh, it's going to take me forever to get kind of the next promotion, and you know, there's probably 7 layers between me and the CIO, and how will I ever even get any visibility, and is my voice even count in here, you know, especially if I'm a newbie or somebody who is coming in with a kind of different background or a different thought process. Actually, that's what we're welcoming, that's what we're looking for. So I want to create that image and that culture for that person coming in, saying, that's why you're here. So day one, we're expecting you to contribute and raise your hand. If you don't think this is the right way to do it, you know, there's right ways and wrong ways to do that, but we're welcoming that. So that's something you want to focus on as well. You really want to be honest and transparent with resources as well. So don't oversell it, because that can backfire on you as well. We're also looking at new channels to bring talent in. So I'm working with a company up in Wilmington, Delaware called TPI. Basically what they do is they recruit folks on the autism spectrum, you know, who have a unique skill set. They screen them and they train them based upon the roles that I'm defining. And then they teach my company how to create a culture that would welcome that resource. You know, what accommodations might they need? So I, went down and I talked to them, and I met with the, graduates of their program, and they're phenomenal. Now, this is transformational in and of itself. When you bring that culture into your culture, a lot of things are going to happen. And some of them really good, some of them can be really challenging for you. You have to have an entire enterprise that's welcoming of folks with disabilities, and we do, thankfully. Our organization is extremely open to that. But it's not just localized to your team. So folks with autism have a unique ability to really hyper-focus. So there were some technology skill sets like testers that I couldn't find test automation engineers. So I could train these folks to do that, and within 8 weeks, they were competent to a point where I could bring them onto a team and they could start contributing. The idea wasn't just staff aug, though. We were trying to create career pathways for folks on the spectrum to give them hope of independence. And in doing so, I was trying to change the culture of my team that was kind of rigid in its thinking. And I have that mini culture within these application teams where the rock star developer kind of calls the shots. And there was no kind of equal counterpart to that influence on the team. When I started bringing these folks in with their different ways of thinking, that dynamic changed. And it was bumpy at first, but it changed for the better. So if you're ever interested in talking about the Precisionists Incorporated is what they're called. It's a brand new organization. I'm happy to share the information. We're looking at it right now. I don't think we're in the lead in this. There's other companies that have actually taken the plunge and have brought folks on board. I've got projects slated for them to start in January, and now I'm just working with TPI on the training curriculum. But yeah, keep the credibility with your organization too. If you're just transforming in name only, and these roles are perceived as, hey, he was a, he's a project manager, call him Scrum Master, he really does the same thing now with rituals, you're gonna bleed credibility. So you don't want to do that. And I manage this by having frequent conversations with my business owners and demonstrating capabilities. I want to give them showcases of here's what we're doing and show them incrementally how this is changing. And then play back. Here's what we did over 6 months or 8 months. And that's the transformation that we're talking about. So it's not all kind of hidden behind closed doors and then we big bang them 6 months into it and say, do you feel it? We show them incrementally along the way and we keep them on board. And if they've got concerns, I like to address them early on before they fester. Global forces, so there's a lot of things that are impacting IT, actually business, life today. And I've listed a couple of these trends right now. The fourth industrial revolution, demographic shifts, talent gaps, data explosion, you can see them up there. The fourth industrial revolution, So the first industrial revolution, using steam and water to drive industry. Electricity is invented. That's a complete change to the way industry works, touches it just about every industry. The third industrial revolution was really the data explosion in mid-20th century, where PCs and computers and information age arrived. The fourth industrial revolution, and this is out of the World Economic Forum, talks about really now the transfusion of all those third industrial revolution capabilities now. When they're combined, you've got things like IoT, you've got RPA, you've got AI. Things that used to be Horizon 2 or Horizon 3 for most companies, we're looking at it, but we're not really doing much with it, suddenly are very accelerated now. And even if you're not doing anything with it real yet, you're probably looking at it in ways over the next 6 months. It could probably be a pilot proof of fit, proof of concept within your organization. And that was unheard of. If you would have asked me back in my ExxonMobil days, when would you guys be looking at robotics or artificial intelligence? If it wasn't prime time and production ready, we probably weren't going to be looking at it. And it was just the company's culture, which was hyper-focused on things that work and how we can execute, because that's what they needed to do. Today, completely different. They're almost looking for those opportunities, and things are getting accelerated on a smart basis, so they're not just casting a wide net and placing all their bets, but where there's a legitimate business value proposition, things are getting board of director attention early on. So even in Fannie Mae, artificial intelligence is being looked at now as a production-ready capability. And how are we going to do it? Don't really know yet. But would I expect to see it happen in the next 6 months? I just would. I'd expect to see something out there saying, there it is, there's the application of what we're talking about. Demographic shifts, so the millennials will be the majority age group within the workforce. If they're not right now, they shortly will be as the boomers cycle all the way through. So that culturally will change right away. You'll see some significant changes, just the ways we work and the values and expectations of the workforce within our organizations is going to change as that demographic expands. Talent gaps, and we're seeing that right now. We're looking for engineering talent every day out there, and we're trying to replace the talent that we're losing with new talent. We're looking for those folks that have got experience with these Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 capabilities, and they're not in-house today. So we're in constant state of recruiting and training for these resources, and the ability to be a lifelong learner is really something that's core to us. We don't expect folks to have expertise in every one of these domains. They couldn't possibly, but they better be really good at learning quick, because that's what the expectation is within the organization, both on an engineering side as well as on a business domain side. Emerging technologies, we talked a little bit about that. Things that just were kind of distant future now are front and center. Climate change and complexity, that's the world we're living in right now. And if your organization hasn't been touched by that, our organization certainly has been. Whether it's operations of your data centers, or the markets that you support, or the customer base that you're supporting, or the channel partners that they're all being touched by these same things, and you got to be aware of it and have the agility and flexibility within your organization to respond to those changes, because they will ripple into your organization as well. I think we had about 25 of our lenders activate their disaster recovery business continuity plans back in August when we had our hurricane, our first of 4 hurricanes. Caught us all off guard. Like, I wonder if I, Fannie Mae, are part of their business continuity plan. You're damn right you are. So load up your fax machines, turn on your phones, because guess what? The systems are down in Houston right now, but we still want to do business. So what are you going to do? And it got us thinking that how prepared are we for the next one of these things? So the interrelationship between us, our partners, and our customers, if it wasn't clear before that that's a priority, it is very clear right now. And it got us doing some soul searching as well as to, hey, am I ready? If my data center was in Houston, what would be happening to me right now? And am I prepared for those same type of events? And that's a board of directors conversation that comes down very quickly to us within the IT organization, the business, saying, hey, here's a new priority, a new imperative. Let's get on it. So there's new talent patterns that are going to emerge out of this. And I stole most of this, frankly, from Gartner. So Gartner has been talking about the Renaissance developer now for a little while, and it's something that I buy into, and it's a presentation that I give to my team as well. Developers used to be relegated to the back. These technologists were kind of back office, black box. We didn't know who they were. If you asked somebody who is your absolute best developer, your rockstar developer, had no idea. That's a problem. So now we're getting them more front and center. First and foremost, they have to have versatility. And if you only know your legacy stuff and you only know limited engineering capabilities, tools, skill sets, you are of limited value to your team going forward. We still need you and you're still valued. So I don't want anyone to be my team running for the doors, but I need them to understand that that's not going to be enough. And it was enough 20 years ago, but it's not going to be enough 20 years from now. So you got to start thinking about more of what we call a diamond type of career path. So jumping around to different opportunities, different areas to get a breadth of experience, as well as the depth of experience that you're building on right now. That's altogether different. That's not always advancement, but it's valuable. And that's what we want to encourage. Not just you got to get to that next level where you're a manager or a supervisor or a director or a vice president. Yeah, we all have aspirations of try to move up as well, but sometimes the best way to move up is to move over as well. And that's not intuitive to folks who aren't in tune to what we're talking about here. And they might think of it as, just a lateral move or even a step backwards. Like, why would I do that? Here's why you want to do that. And we have to explain that to them, that there's value. Lifelong learners, I talk about that, and I'm going to continue to reinforce that. I've never read or been asked to read so many books as I have since I joined Fannie Mae. And the expectation is you're reading them. These aren't like suggestions. Like, we're talking about this stuff. Like everything we talked about, the DevOps handbooks, the Phoenix Project, we're expected to read. We're talking about those things in meetings. So, and I'm a lousy reader. I've gotten better at it, but it's a skill set right now that you want your team adopting as well, that they've got to be in tune to what's going on in the marketplace and buying into this lifelong learning pattern. They're collaborators, they're communicators. If you can get your developers up there giving, showcases to business folks, it's invaluable. They learn who they are, they get comfortable giving these presentations, they get immediate feedback from the folks saying, hey, I understand the value to deliver right now. We've never done this before. When we went to the Agile methodology and we start doing these showcases and we ask some of our developers to get in front of business folks and start talking about what they're doing in terms that the business people can understand, not in your tech talk, but explain the value of this, all of a sudden it's a game changer for them. Now they have a new energy about what they do and they can't wait to get to a sprint cycle because they know there's a showcase because they want to get up and talk about what they did. And that's very reinforcing to the team because they all want to do that. It gives them that stage time that they all like. It also breaks down some of the barriers. There are folks who've got English as a second or third language, and they need practice getting in front of folks and talking. And this gives them a safe environment to do that because they're comfortable talking tech. They may not be comfortable talking the language, English language, if that's what you speak in your shop, like we do. But you can help them because this is a safe environment, and they are grounded in their knowledge of the technology, which gives them a good, solid foundation. The diamond-shaped career paths, we're doing that now. Encourage you to look at that as well. It's not just about vertical moves. Lateral moves have value as well. The diversity and inclusion piece is a real big play at Fannie Mae right now. And adding in now folks with disabilities is very different. It's very different. And bringing in folks who are on the autism spectrum, and those numbers are staggering. As I started doing research into this, the numbers are just absolutely staggering. In theory, every open position I have right now could be filled if we were to open doors to folks on the spectrum and bring them in and have them trained and screened. There's that many of them. And as I talk to my team, they all lean in right away because everybody knew somebody. Some folks had brothers, sisters, sons, and daughters that were on the spectrum, and they're wondering, what is the career path for these folks? What's going to happen to them? So, you talk about getting folks jazzed up very quickly. That's a good way to do it. And when they see the commitment coming from the top saying, I don't know how we're going to make this work, but we're going to make this work because this is something that's really, it's the right thing to do from a altruistic perspective, but it's the right thing to do from a business perspective. You get their complete buy-in. So good way to create credibility with that team. The open mindset, so that kind of fear of failure, are you okay to try something, knowing that you're not an expert, knowing that you might fail, but learning from it. A lot of folks aren't that way, and some of our reward systems and our processes, contradict that. They actually discourage that. So you want to have a culture of open mindset that says, you know, not with reckless abandon, but smartly, let's take the chances that are worth taking, and if we fail, let's fail fast, learn from it, and move on. That's very different. That's been the sea change in our organization, where we actually allow some of these Horizon 2 things to come into a near production environment saying, let's test this out. We're not going to put the crown jewels at risk, but let's try this and see if this will work. Frankly, I think DevOps would have fell in that category 2 years ago. I don't think it's that way anymore, but it took a VP evangelizing and twisting arms and cajoling people to say, you really have to do this, and creating an imperative saying, you may not feel you need it today, 2015, but I guarantee you by 2020, if you don't have this muscle memory in place, you know, you're going to be at risk. And I think that's true. So the Renaissance developer, this is the piece I was talking about from Gartner. The technical skills and subject matter expertise used to be the yardstick, but you know, if all you have is that siloed knowledge of the legacy systems, and I've got those folks today, working with them to create a breadth of experiences and taking what they know and they're comfortable with and adding incrementally to that and letting them become teachers of that skill set so that you've got some bench strength with regard to, you know, whatever that system happens to be, whether it's your mainframe system back in Toronto, or I've got a boatload of those things sitting in my data center that frankly are never going to make it to the cloud. They're going to get retired and replaced with something, I just don't know what it is. And that poor guy who supports it knows that as well. So he's clinging on to it. And I want to work with them to make sure that there's a pathway for them forward, not they go out with the legacy system. Today, great development teams are cross-functional. So I've got a handful, I'm going to say 3% of my Scrum teams actually have developers who can do tests and testers who can do some development. So as they go through their stories for the day and say, where are we backlogged? Where are we hung up? There's a very precious few that can actually say, I can take that story down and go develop it. Or we are in a mess testing right now. We need help with regression scripts. Who can help us? Developers can help you do that. I've got very few who can do that, but more and more each day. And that's really what we have to get to. These autonomous Scrum teams that can actually work through their priorities as a team, not get stuck with a bottleneck because I don't have a resource that can do performance testing. So what do you want me to do? Teams basically now are starting to divvy out their work. It used to be our tech leads would go down there and say, here's the kind of priorities. We're empowering them to do this. It's bumpy. And you have to have a product owner and a business team that's on board with this because they're always going to have the urge to go down there and say, here's what's most important. And we can coach them all we want. And in the end, whatever's pressuring them to do that is going to be impacting your team. So you want to try to screen them from that and help them out from that. And that's that one-on-ones that you got to have with your product owner. Here's what we're trying to do. If I add this feature for your application today, you will benefit. Your team will benefit. That application will be better. If you let me do it my way, then how we develop that feature for you will help the whole organization. I can create strategic advantage for the company if you let me do it and how we develop, or we can just add a feature for you which will benefit you. Can you take a general interest perspective with me? And if you frame it that way, sometimes you'll get the buy-in. So really what we're asking them to do is think bigger than just their feature and their team, as important as that is, and we get that. But if you let me do this, I can create advantages and strategic capabilities for the company. And that's really what we want to do. And if you can sell it on that, sometimes you get some traction. Developers have got to think like architects. They got to think like solution design. They got to think with user experience in mind, and mine don't. They don't do that at all. They're starting to think about that right now. We send them to UI school so they get, they understand now. We've got the pictures of the user profile up there, and we put them deliberately in sight of the developer so they have this idea of who's using that system and how are they going to use it. And if they've got that in mind, chances are they're going to be a little bit more thoughtful about just racing through a solution pattern. And they're going to understand, hey, can this actually be supported, and what will the experience be like day 2, day 3, day 102? As I said, developers or testers, it can't just be, I'm very limited in what I can do, and if the team gets slowed down, too bad, go hire more QAs. That's my recommendation to you. If that's the way you feel, that's probably not a good fit for you. That's hard as well because folks who came in today who are working on my Scrum teams today were brought in as developers and probably told deliberately, this is the scope of your job. And now I'm telling them, no, you got to think more broadly. And even though you're not really good at it, if you can get better at it, I will reward you for that. And you can help accelerate the velocity of the team, not just the velocity of your role. can you buy into that? And then reward it and recognize it. And even if it sucks at first, support it, saying, hey, they tried, and we're going to reward that, and it got better. And the test team really appreciated that, because now we're starting to act like a team. You can actually create that culture within your sub-teams. That will spread. Since we are in San Diego, I just want to leave you with a quote. This is from William McRaven, 9th Commander of the Special Operations. And during the commencement address at the University of Texas, Austin, back in 2014, he replayed his life as a Navy SEAL commander and the lessons that he learned during SEAL training, which I think are invaluable to all of us. He has 10 of them, and you can go check out his TED Talk. It's pretty interesting. But I really like the first one he talked about. You know, since we're all here trying to change the world, and I try to explain this to my team a lot, you know, basically the point is this: if you want to change the world, start by making your bed. You know, a simple task, but a simple task that you will complete, which will create a sense of confidence and lead to a second task and a third task, and before you know it, you've completed many tasks well. It also reminds you that little things matter. And in my company, those little things really become big things if you don't take care of them. So addressing the little things will help you confidently address the bigger things. You have a bad day, and we all do. Always nice to go home to a made bed. A bed that you made. It will give you encouragement that tomorrow will be a better day. So you want to go change the world? Go home and make your bed.